Welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. My name is Dusty.
And I'm Daniel.
And we are covering As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. And I got that correct on the first take.
Great job. You know, nothing says getting in on the first take like congratulating yourself for getting in on the first take.
It's more like I was thinking about it really hard as I was getting ready to say it, and I'm like, don't screw it up, don't screw it up. It's a long title, don't screw it up. And I didn't screw it up. So
yeah, you did a good job. Congratulations.
it took me
Go ahead.
it took me probably like the third or fourth day for me to like really kind of get an idea of it, because I was like the lemon tree book. What's the name? And I have to keep looking at it to see if I remember the title.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting though. It's this month. I don't know how many people are aware, but it is Arab American Heritage Month.
Is it really?
And, it is.
Oh.
And we are reading, as Dusty mentioned, As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa Katouh. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but yeah.
Oh, I wasn't even gonna try.
Well, I figure she at least deserves, having her name mentioned with her book.
Yeah, I don't have her name in front of me, so I wasn't going to try to say her name. I figured I'd leave that honor to you. So also, you're a little better at pronouncing than I am.
Maybe a little bit, but I wouldn't. I'm no prince at it. But yeah, that's the book we're reading for this month, and a little different than we've gone in the past. I think this is, this book is also. Most of the books that we read tend to be kind of multi-genre in a way. There's not been many books that are just of one genre that we've read, and honestly, I kind of like that. I like the flexibility. I like the nuance. I like the interplay of the different genres and styles. This one, though, introduces a genre that we really haven't done too much of, and it is the romance genre, and it's kind of a little bit of a mixture of a war novel, as this novel takes place during about approximately 12 years before this recording, near the outbreak of the Syrian civil war. So yeah, it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of like a social novel to a certain extent, and a little bit of a romance as well.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it was not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah, this book actually was not really super on my radar. It's not one that I'd heard of. It was actually something that that your wife mentioned to us, and I don't know. I just kind of looked into it, and I don't know. It seems pretty interesting, and I think honestly, I think it's a good time for it. So I was happy to give it a try, and I guess just some kind of off the dome, off the cuff thoughts. So far, I really like it. There's a little there's some things that are definitely I've never really been a romance reader, but I think it's always good to try to like stretch yourself and kind of like try other things and kind of interrogate your thoughts about why do you like something, why do you not like something, and I think this is a very good kind of like foothold if you're someone like me that's kind of not delved too far into the genre. In terms of it's kind of like style and influences. One thing that I find rather interesting is that this is a novel that, from what I can tell from the author and some of the things that I've read, pieces of interviews and like the sort of acknowledgments and such in the book itself, she is very influenced by the Studio Ghibli films, which is interesting. It's interesting to have a book that is kind of inspired by film, usually when you run into situations like that, it's usually a novelization of a film directly. I don't know. I'm sure these are things that happen, but it's kind of interesting to see an author being very upfront about film specifically as an influence in her work.
Yeah, it also, at least to me, it felt like it came like seemingly out of nowhere, um, where it was like not really mentioned at all, and then suddenly over the span of like 2 or 3 pages, she was just like, "Oh man, this is just like Studio Ghibli," or "I love Studio Ghibli films," and like, "Oh man, don't you just love Studio Ghibli?" And I'm like, she she very clearly is a fan of Miyazaki. It didn't like
Many
bother
such
me.
cases.
Yeah, it didn't bother me or anything. It wasn't like bad writing. It just kind of was very sudden, um, and I wasn't expecting to just suddenly get bombarded with a huge amount of talk about that, especially in a book like this. I don't know when there will be a good place to say this, especially since this book is relatively heavy. But I don't know about you, but I couldn't help but laugh when Salama is talking to Layla, and Layla's like, "Oh yeah, you should get married," and she's like, "Marriage in this economy?"
Well, wait. How did you feel about that?
I thought it was funny. I laughed at it.
Okay. Yeah, that was very. It's kind of interesting. It was a very, particularly of that time period, kind of humor.
I've made in this economy jokes in my time as well, and I don't know. It's just not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah, and I mean it worked. It worked very well as kind of a dark humor, and I think that's not outside of the desires of the author here. I think she wants us to laugh at times, in addition to being emotionally affected by these moments. Because I think it's more humanizing to view people as whole people, which even in moments of great despair, humans have a tendency to try to lighten the mood via humor. So to me I haven't I don't have any problems with her attempts at humor. Not saying that you do, but I was just saying broadly speaking, it shows a sort of interesting level to her writing.
Yeah, like I said, it's just something I wasn't expecting at all, and then it just suddenly happened, and I'm like, "Haha, oh man, that was funny." So like I said, I didn't know where there would be a natural spot to bring that up, but I just figured I'd throw that in now because I feel like the rest of what we're gonna cover is pretty heavy considering.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely so.
But yeah, when does this book take place? I have to say I'm not I don't have my finger on the pulse of Syrian history. I know
Okay.
it's relatively modern, like within the last 15 years modern. But do you know when this book takes place, more or less?
Well, my this is just my recollection of the time, but I think the Syrian civil war started around 2012. I think there was kind of a revolutionary outgrowth of the sort of the Arab Spring of 2011, and then the civil war kind of kicked off sometime around 2012 is how I remember it.
Okay. Yeah. So it takes place, I guess, then in the early 2010s, and it's during the Syrian civil war, and we're following a character named Salama, who is a pharmacist that is forced to now become ostensibly a do-it-all doctor surgeon in the midst of this what I can only say sounds like an absolutely brutal and terrifying war, especially for
Yeah, if I remember from the time there was a lot of it was just very brutal. There was a lot of images of like bombed out cityscapes, and a lot of this kind of is it ties into the novel. There were a lot of citizen journalists, so to say, that were like uploading like either like aftermath of attacks or combat footage or just anything like that. It was one of the first wars that I remember that was like really very present in and kind of like online. So it was something that if you were on the internet a lot during that time period, you would see and hear a good amount about it.
So yeah, so the story starts. We're following this woman named Salama, who is a pharmacist who is now having to be a doctor surgeon, kind of do it all in the midst of this this civil war, and just kind of being thrown into it, and about the kind of trauma that she deals with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was particularly beyond just her being a pharmacist and not really signing up for the duty she got, but she had just completed her first year of pharmacy school. So she's pretty young. Like we're somewhere like I would say like early 20s at oldest, and she's kind of been thrown into this situation where she's having to do essentially battlefield medicine, using just what is on hand. Oftentimes performing surgeries. I mean, there's sterilization, but sometimes that's it. Oftentimes no anesthetics and that kind of thing. It's actually an astonishingly grim situation, and it's just kind of incredible how she's able to kind of deal with all of that.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think she's 19.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
So yeah, one of the first major things I would say that happens in this book, outside of just learning about her having to be a somewhat impromptu doctor to all of these innocent people that are being injured by the as I understand it, it's the national military that's doing all this, and that they're living in an area that is, as she puts it, protected by the what do they call it? The Free Militia?
The Free Syrian Army.
Okay. So she goes home, and we meet her best friend, her sister-in-law, Layla, who is 7 months pregnant. And we get a little bit of their relationship. We learn that they've been friends for forever. They were like born in the same hospital around the same time. They grew up together. Layla married Salama's brother, and she's been staying with her in Layla's house ever since her house got bombed out and her mother died. And so we get a little bit of like back and forth, kind of learning these characters. This is where the in this economy joke comes in. And when she goes to bed, we experience one of the lasting traumas that came about from the bombing that she survived that killed her mom. I think this would have been pretty early on. And it's she has. Would it be safe to say that this was like trauma-induced schizophrenia?
When she's seeing, like, speaking to the like her dead relatives.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, more than just that, but like the I think his name. I apologize if I'm pronouncing this wrong. I'm gonna probably just Google it real quick just to make sure and correct myself. But I think his name was like Quaff.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Oh my god, I typed in grease, not trees. Cough. It's Khawf.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's. Man, I'm so bad at pronouncing. Here we go. Oh, apparently it means fear. Apparently it's fear in Arabic.
Well, aptly named.
Kawaf. I think it's Kawaf.
Go-off. Okay.
I apologize if that is incorrect. If it is, Google has failed me. Where we meet Kawaf, who is this man that she, for lack of a better term, hallucinates, and he brings with him his own form of hallucinations that she sees. It's like he brings back like painful memories, scenes of her talking to her dad and her brother before they go off to protest, where they were then arrested near the start of this whole conflict. Seeing her house get bombed out and her mom dying again, and one of the things that's kind of pushed in the conversation between Layla earlier is that Layla wants Salama to talk to this guy named Am at the hospital, and he's ostensibly he's a guy who you talk to if you want to get smuggled out of Syria and into Europe, and since Layla is 7 months pregnant, she wants the three of them to leave and go back to Europe, whereas Salama she feels a little more tied to their home, especially because she's the only pharmacist that's still there. So she's kind of torn about it, and she didn't talk to Am today. And Kawaf is essentially punishing her for it. He's giving her these ultimatums of like you have to talk to him, or else I'm going to torture you with these visions. I won't just be only at night. You'll see me during the day, and I'll torment you during the day, and then you won't be able to help anybody at the hospital. So he keeps claiming throughout this entire section we read, which we read the first 12 chapters, by the way. Throughout this entire first section of the book, it seems like he says that he's doing all of this because he calls himself a form of like self-preservation that her subconscious has created for herself. Like he's doing this to protect her, which I don't know if I believe that personally. Because
in what way? Do you mean like he's not protecting her, or he is not a creation of her mind, but is in fact an extant being?
Oh no. I definitely think he's part of her mind. I don't think he exists purely to do what she thinks is best for her subconsciously, because I mean you wouldn't. I could definitely see him being a manifestation of her guilt, but the whole idea that he exists purely to show her the correct path, the path to her safety, and doing that through guilt and manipulation, I don't really quite buy that he is acting benevolently through malicious means.
No, I agree with you, but I think it is not a necessarily uncommon phenomenon where people, particularly those who are victims of some kind of trauma, have some sort of guilt complex that they kind of rationalize as like keeping them safe in some way. I think that's kind of what's happening there. Is it's insofar as he exists, it's kind of like an amalgamation of, or personification of, like these various kind of like traumas and sort of dark impulses. The impulse towards like fear and survivor's guilt and that kind of thing, and it's just kind of all of these things kind of working together as like a composite sort of negative mental state that she's kind of rationalizing to. That's why she can't dismiss it out of hand, because there is a part of her at this juncture that fears that all of her, like, her survivor's guilt, her You know, because one of the things that he's harping on is like saying, you know, you promised your brother that you would keep his wife safe, and you know, you're not doing that because if every day that you stay in Syria, she remains literally in the firing line. So in not doing that, you are not following up with the promise that you made to your brother, who she believes is dead or possibly worse. So I could see that in some it may not be truly in her best interest to listen necessarily to this personification, but I think there is something. It's not just there is a reason why she is kind of like forced to listen, and it's a sort of her own vulnerability and her own sort of self-doubt in this moment.
Yeah. So that's kind of a big backdrop in terms of like another hell that she has to live every night on top of the war that encompasses her every day. When she goes home, she has to deal with what I think we can both say seems to be a manifestation of her guilt and grief that exists as she sees it to continue to punish her. So when she does finally get around to talk to Am, because you know, like we said, Kawaf does give her an ultimatum saying, if you don't talk to him tomorrow, I won't leave you alone during the day. I'll torment you at all times. She goes and talks to him, saying that she needs a boat, and he's like, all right, $2,000 a piece, which I don't have a conversion right here to say how much that is for like, you know, the US dollar, but I imagine it's at least for as far as they're concerned quite expensive, because they don't have it. I think she said she only had like $3,000 at this point in time, and with the massive inflation of food and water due to the shortage and issues caused from this conflict, it's kind of drained what little money she was able to get from her. I think it was that her father had given her before he was arrested.
Yeah, he withdrew the money just before he went to go to the protest, so she could have something to live on if he didn't come back.
Yeah. So she doesn't have the money for both of them, and she knows that she can't send Layla by herself because she's a pregnant woman all alone and she'd be in countries that she can't speak the language of. I think their end destination would be Germany, and they like barely know English, and that's about it outside of Arabic. And so she's just kind of stuck at that point. But the one thing that Layla suggests is that apparently all families, at least in this area, in this region, they have heirlooms in the form of gold, and if they use that gold, it's possible, Layla thinks, that could be a good form of bargaining that can be used to get them on the boat, though Salama is less than keen on this because it's a family heirloom. It means more than its monetary value to her. So she's not really thrilled about that. But we're soon after introduced to, or I guess kind of reintroduced, because he's kind of mentioned offhandedly at one point in time as just, you know, another group of people coming in that need help, and he's like carrying this little girl that needs help. We're reintroduced to this character named Keenan, and he comes back to the hospital, and he's saying that his sister, who had been there yesterday and had a little surgery done to remove shrapnel from her stomach, she's in a lot of pain and she has a fever, and Salama realizes that this is because there's still shrapnel in her stomach, so she has Keenan take her to his apartment to where his little sister is, and she performs an impromptu surgery to find and remove the last piece of shrapnel in her stomach. As she's, you know, we have a little bit of oh my god, I'm not alone, because Keenan is there with his little brother and his little sister, Um, but she's ostensibly like, I'm alone in a man's apartment. Oh goodness, I need to leave. However, it seems like a battle has broken out just outside, and one of the constant risks they have to deal with are snipers. And one of the most common injuries or fatalities that she witnesses in the hospital have come from those snipers shooting at old people or children, which is just horrible. Like I just I can't just to kind of, if I could soapbox here for a second. It takes a special kind of depravity, regardless of what side you are on, in whatever conflict you see yourself in. It takes a really special amount of depravity to shoot an old person or a child for any reason whatsoever. Like, what kind of evil sack of shit human being do you have to be to shoot a child with a sniper rifle? Like, for real. Like, an enemy combatant, like, it's war. Call me a conscientious objector or whatever, but obviously soldiers are going to kill soldiers in war. It's just kind of the reality of it, as much as that also just sucks, if we're being real. But like, intentionally killing civilians, especially elderly and children, that's so fucking low. Like, that's subhuman. And you got to know, like, there's no ambiguity here. You know you're shooting a child. You can't sit there and be like, oh no, I thought it was a very short soldier. There's no ambiguity here. You're murdering children for no reason. Let's be real here. For absolutely zero reason. So yeah, these soldiers suck, and that's putting it way too lightly.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark portion of the book, where you kind of see the kind of their situation and the fears that the civilian population that we see in the city of Homs. I think this takes place during the siege of Homs, if I remember correctly. And I don't know. It's just Katouh, I think, is. Anyway, I think she creates she's very good. One of the things that I like to point out is the creation of atmosphere, and I think she does a very good job of creating this atmosphere where there is like these sort of and I think this is kind of true of her inspiration, to go back to it for a second, of studio Ghibli movies. There's these kind of light moments and these very like strong characters, but there's these moments of just like real like very very there's a lot of darkness there as well. And I think that the tension that is created by the kind of like the ever-present threat of the sniper is something that she does really well in this novel. One little last thing before we move on from Kinan's apartment. The character of Kinan, he's an older brother to two siblings, one like a 9-year-old girl and one like a 13-ish-year-old boy, and he's about the same age as Salama, and they go to. When they go to his apartment, his parents they also died earlier in the conflict. So it's kind of this we see he's kind of at a very young age had to become a parent to his younger brother and sister, and he is very very tender. Is one of the very interesting aspects of this character. Is he's actually he's a very kind person, and he's trying to help his siblings the best he can under the situation. And also, I guess couple last things. During the surgery, this was another one that was performed without anesthesia. So removing shrapnel from like a 9-year-old girl's stomach without anesthesia is. Oh, that was a horrifying horrifying part of the book. Maybe one of the most like skin crawling passages of any of the books we've covered so far.
Yeah, and it's a very similar thing as to something we said back in February when we were covering Beloved, in that this book may be fiction, but its subject matter is based in truth. You know, this is a historical fiction book. This is something that it didn't necessarily, to my knowledge, like happen exactly as we're reading it, but there are plenty of, this is real enough to where it's things like this were happening in reality during this time period. Things that were, the things that we're seeing, and probably worse, even worse than the things that we've been shown in this book. Like, this is a fictionalized take on a real event that happened not even that long ago. If you're right, 12 years ago. So
yeah,
it's crazy to think about. It's I don't know. I guess it's one of those things where it's like it kind of gives you a little bit of perspective of I don't know. It does a weird thing to how you feel about your life and your problems comparatively, because it's something that you and I have never had to deal with. We never had we weren't alive for our country's civil war, and we haven't had to deal with any major conflicts in our homeland. It's always been across the ocean. So it's just I don't know. It's weird to think about these things, that like these things really happen, and it's just the depravity of it, and the brutality and the cruelty, and it's I don't know, for me personally, it's just it's hard to fathom the depths some people will go to, the evils that they will enact on others. Just I don't know. It's not that I don't believe that this actually happened. It's just hard to believe that this happened,
I know, I can see what you mean. Especially, it's just, just the senselessness of it. It's just the wanton cruelty that you just, it can be hard to wrap your mind around. And it was a particularly cruel conflict. We don't necessarily need to recap it, but there was a lot of from the side of the government, and this was one of the conflicts that spawned the group ISIS, and it was just it's still kind of ongoing. It hasn't officially ended yet, but it is essentially kind of like settled into the stage of a frozen conflict. But I don't know. It's just hard to fathom like how brutal this conflict was.
Yeah. Do you remember what the for lack of a better term, the narrative of this conflict was as it was shown in the United States as it was happening?
I mean, it was just different things at different times. It kind of depended on. There was a lot of like at the beginning. I remember there was a lot of a sort of like popular like media sort of coverage, favorable media coverage for like the Free Syria Army, and I remember there was a lot of armed shipments at the time to ostensibly. I remember this phrase very deliberately used, like moderate rebels, and that kind of thing. I remember that phrase being thrown around a lot. I also remember there was a group of sort of Kurdish, Kurds being an ethnic minority in the country, kind of like freedom fighters, kind of posting up in the sort of the northeastern part of the country. And they generally received pretty favorable coverage as well. Sort of as the conflict wore on, as I recall, a lot of the moderate groups sort of kind of they petered out as far as I was aware, and this is where it gets a little tricky, and I don't want to maybe misremember, but I do remember there was a lot of talk at the time of a lot of these so-called moderate rebels actually becoming either defecting to or actually essentially being ISIS. And like there was this one news article I remember reading about, like it was like an expose or like a investigative journalism about like how they recovered. There was like a recovered missile launcher like two months after off the factory line in America was recovered from like after like a special forces raid on like an ISIS encampment in Syria, and it was like only 2 months old, and it was just there was a lot of scandal around that, and there was also allegations of and I think they were substantiated, or although there's probably some people that would argue against it, but I think there were the argument the allegations were largely substantiated of the use of chemical weapons by the Assad regime during the war. But yeah, over the time it just became kind of this violent morass of like ISIS took comtrol of a large portion of the country. And I think both the United States and Russia were flying like combat sorties into the country and like bombing ISIS. It was, and I think eventually Turkey also got involved. And I think they still remain in Syria because I think they share a border, and I think they're mostly posted up in like the northwestern portion of the country. Over time, sort of the Free Syrian Army and ISIS kind of lost ground to the regime, the Assad regime, and as far as I know, it is like it's most of the country is back in the hands of the Assad regime. There's like some remnants of what was the Free Syrian Army holds some parts, and the Kurdish people still hold some parts. And basically, my understanding is like not a lot of like major fighting has taken place in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know if this is related to this particular conflict or not, but I do remember at some point in time between 2012 and 2016 hearing about people criticizing Obama for either sending drone strikes in Syria or like a risk of starting a war with Syria. I remember Syria was a bit of a hot button issue with the Obama administration for a hot minute there.
Yeah, that was true. There was a lot of there was a lot of kind of, I don't know. It's just difficult. It's difficult to talk about any sort of, I don't know. I am sort of inherently skeptical of any sort of foreign intervention. It's just it's hard to imagine it being things. I don't know. It's just difficult to imagine it helping, and it does. I don't know. Didn't seem to ultimately a lot of what the United States did in regards to the Syrian civil war.
Yeah. Just, I don't know. Just a bad time all around. Yeah. It just, I don't know. It does feel like, and I don't think this is anything new. This is probably as old as warfare at this point. But it's just crazy to see the dehumanization of quote unquote the other side. And I think that's the reason why we have these situations where these military men, I'm assuming these are like the Assad soldiers, can just murder these civilians like this. It just, I don't know. It reminds me of, and I don't want to go into this whole current hot conflict issue that's happening in our world at this moment, but it reminds me of something that I heard just this last week about the Israel-Palestine, or really the Israel-West Bank Palestinian conflict that's going on right now. And there's this morning radio show I listen to on the way to work. I think the appropriate term is I hate listen to it because I think the two hosts are a bunch of idiots that have no idea what they're talking about. But I just listen to it because I don't know. It's something to listen to in the morning, and I don't know. Maybe I just some weird sense of just you enjoy listening to something that you despise because it almost maybe it's selfish. That's not the point. Anyways, I don't know, I just feel like these two dudes, they have a lot of really really bad takes about a lot of things, and there was a report about I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think there was either a bombing or just a general attack that had it had killed. I want to say it was like 6 Palestinian civilians. I think there might have been a couple of children involved. This would have happened. Not to date stamp this particularly, but I think this would have happened like last Tuesday or Wednesday relative to this recording date. So fairly recent, and so they're covering it, and they're talking about how like 6 Palestinian civilians were killed in this attack, and one of the hosts is just like, oh yeah, well how many civilians were killed on October 7th? And it's like that, I don't know, it just, to me that felt like a really disgusting thing to say. Like, yeah, civilians were killed at, I think it was October 7th, right, when this whole thing kicked off.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, there were a lot of Israeli civilians that were killed, but it just struck me as remarkably insensitive and just really tone deaf. You don't, just because, I mean, these guys are very 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 clearly like pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian, which I don't want to try and draw a line and pick sides here. I'm pro civilian. I'm pro innocent bystander in this situation. I think that innocent life lost on either side of this conflict is unacceptable and should not be happening. I just think that the response to hearing that even if it was quote unquote only 6, which is 6 too many, were killed on what you see as the other side of this conflict, the quote unquote enemy of this conflict. You don't hand wave that away because it's not as much as quote unquote your side's innocent lives that were lost 6 months ago.
And it also is totally out of context of the broader loss of life within Gaza, which is north of 30,000 at this point.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it just struck me as remarkably tone deaf, and I don't remember if it was him or the other host made a comment about like, we don't have a scoreboard, but it's like you're trying to make this a scoreboard, like the loss of innocent life, like it's a competition, like, oh well, it's not as much as we lost in this, and it's just that absolute disregard for innocent life, even though it's on the side that you apparently are just completely disregarding and seeing as the enemy. It's just so disgusting, and it's dehumanizing, and I guess it's just I guess it just shows that even today, which granted this is only about a decade removed from this particular conflict we're talking about with this book, you can still see examples of people completely dehumanizing civilians, innocent people that just want to live, that they're just trying to survive this horrible situation that's been thrust upon them, that they didn't ask for, that they're not trying to propagate. They're just trying to live and survive this remarkably horrible situation. You still to this day have people that'll just look at that and be like, well, you know what, you probably deserve it. And it's just, I don't know, it's just so disgusting. So I can see modern parallels still to this day with that situation as to what's going on in this book.
There's some thoughts I have on that, on the merit. That's one thing that was what I was wanting to talk about there at the end, but I did see those parallels that you were talking about, and that's something that I'm going to mention. We when I can follow up towards the end, but I don't want to. I don't mean to cut you off. All that to say is that I also very strongly. When I was reading the book, I was almost haunted by the parallels. I mean, it's right there in your face. Not to paint with a too broad brush or being like, but you know what I mean. It's like it's astonishingly similar to a current situation we have going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be, history is made out of patterns, and
kind of. It's really more reactions to conditions which can create similar situation. But I take your meaning.
Yeah. I ain't no ultra wordsmith, but yeah, it's just it's I don't know. I think I feel like any decent human should be able to say that any loss of innocent life is a tragedy, regardless of where they align ideologically, or even through some arbitrarily created line in the sand. So yeah, it's just I guess the point being is yeah, like you said, and I think like I've already said, is just it's just crazy reading this book and seeing this conflict that actually happened. I'm just reading a fictionalization that probably isn't going as graphic or as brutal as the reality of the situation was, and finding parallels to a conflict that is happening to us at this current time relative to the time of this recording. Hopefully, this thing ends about as well as it can for both sides. The Israel Palestine thing, though, I honestly I don't believe that's going to happen. Just given it's just it's just kind of crazy just to kind of see the horrors and the depravity that war can set on just the normal people that really at the end of the day, they, like I said, they don't want this conflict. All they want to do is just live their lives and be with their families and just live day to day in their own little piece of life as best as they can make it. So it's just it's a travesty. It's barbarity, and it's I don't know. It sucks. That's not a strong enough word. But that's where I'm at right now. That's the best I can say. It sucks. This book shows a lot of things that sucks, and it reminds me of things happening in our world right now that suck. And it's, oh man, it's just like Beloved. You have to acknowledge these things. You have to look at the reality of what the book is trying to say, and acknowledge that this is real and these are issues that happen. You can't turn your back on it. You have to know that these things happened, and I don't know, do what you can, which granted for the one single individual person is not a lot, but it's all about a group effort, as a country, as a civilization, as humanity, to try and not do these things. But it's easy to say that. It's incredibly hard to do it.
Sure.
But anyways, back to the story, I guess, after our topical tangent there. So Salama, she's wanting to leave and make it back to Layla, especially more so because of this fighting, because she's not sure if the fighting is going to reach Layla's house, and so she's worried for her safety. But Keenan is adamant that she stays because there's bound to be snipers out and about at this moment, and if she leaves, she's essentially putting her life in a massive amount of risk. Just the hot zone notwithstanding, just the snipers and all that. So he convinces her to stay at his place, and she ends up staying the night, and we get a little back and forth between the two of them, a relationship that's starting to grow. And in one of life's great ironies, she feels like she keeps recognizing him, and she's like, I feel like, have we met? Do I know you from somewhere? And he keeps kind of brushing it off. And at this point, Quaff comes in, and he's just kind of pestering her, saying, you got to push this matter. You got to ask him again. Like, you know him from something. And she asks him again, and he admits that. So the day that the conflict started, she was supposed to meet with this man who was a potential marriage prospect. They were going to meet. They were going to, spend the day together, meet, and figure out if it's a relationship that the two families wanted to pursue. But needless to say, it was canceled on account of war. And Keenan is that guy. He is that guy that she was supposed to meet, that she was potentially going to be set up with for marriage, and that causes both of them to, have a big fit of laughter. Because once again, the irony of the situation, that, well, maybe not irony, but just the comedy of the situation of just, oh, look at this, life seemed to have brought us together anyways in this crazy world. So yeah, that's who he is, and he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to seem as that he didn't want to come across as creepy as, oh, I was that guy that was supposed to get married to you that you never got to meet. Because what if she forgot that he existed, and now he looks like that weird guy that is possibly creeping on her? Because how could she remember? But she remembered, so that's what made it funny to her. And so we get a little more of a building of their relationship as they start to kind of get to know each other. And I think it's safe to assume that this is going to be the romance part of the romance genre that this book covers, is the two of them. I think that's a safe assumption.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so she ends up falling asleep there, and she wakes up the next day, and it seems like the conflict has ended for now. And Keenan decides to walk her home back to Layla's house, and when she gets there, Layla's nowhere to be found. She's frantic. She doesn't know if the house looks okay, but she's not sure if something happened to Layla. And she finds Layla in her bedroom. She's like praying or something, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and so they're both relieved to see each other, and of course Layla wants to sip tea about this whole Keenan situation, and he's outside in the like, just I think he's either like just inside the entryway or just outside the door. Keenan doesn't want to potentially embarrass, as I understand this, embarrass himself or Layla by seeing her without her hijab on, which I apologize if I'm not pronouncing words very well, because I'm bad at those things, but that does not happen. Layla decides to stay in the room, and so Salama comes out and she has her goodbye with Keenan. But before he goes, something that they kind of talked about the night before is what Keenan does is he goes out and he films the protests, and he films like the conflicts, and he uploads it to YouTube so that the world can see it, which is, it's kind of one of the marvels of modern technology, because back in the day, I say back in the day, I'm thinking like the 90s, but even like before that, like World War I, World War II, any information about these wars or these conflicts outside of being right there on the front lines would come from maybe some photographs or any journalism that is able to make it into the war zone and come back out and be able to talk about it. Newsreels.
And it was all very controlled. It was almost exclusively, pretty heavily controlled by the, the governing authorities of whoever was in charge of the army that was around that area.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that a lot of the war coverage had a heavy dose of propaganda infused into it as well. So it's just kind of crazy that in this modern age, how you can just it kind of it makes this old school form of journalism and war coverage obsolete, because all you really need at this point in time, at least today, maybe not so much as commonly in 2012 when this was happening, but like today, all you need is a cell phone and a Wi-Fi or a hotspot, and boom, you can upload it to YouTube, you can upload it to Facebook, to TikTok, to whatever, and you can see all of these things as they're happening. It's one of the great marvels of the information age as we live it today, and even back 12 years ago, that this is what he does. He goes and he films these situations and he puts it up on YouTube so that the world can see what's going on. They can see the truth of it without any well, there's going to be a level of bias from him, but not it's not going to be quite the same as straight propaganda. Um, and it's just, that's what he does, and she sees that as him putting not only himself but his little brother and sister at risk, because he's all they have, and if he gets captured or killed by the soldiers for doing this, then he's they're already orphans. Now they're going to be truly without any form of guardianship if he goes. So she's worried for his safety, and so she has this idea that I think it's a little double edged. In that, on the one hand, it gets him away from the hot zones, and on the other hand, it's able to still allow him to do what he's trying to do with these recordings. She says, come to the hospital instead. Don't go to these hot zones. Don't go to these conflict zones. Come to the hospital where you're seeing the results of these conflicts, of this brutality. You're seeing the children, the victims, all of this. You're seeing it all in a, relatively speaking, safer environment, and your message is still coming across, if not even more so than it was before. Come to the hospital and record here. And so he agrees to that. He leaves, and then now she gets to go and have our nice little moment of levity after these pretty heavy couple of chapters, where she's able to just talk to Layla about, ooh, boys, I can't believe it. And it's a nice break in the tension. One thing that this book does very, very well is it knows when to keep going with the atrocities, the horror, the trauma, all of these like bad and heavy topics, but it also knows when to hit the brakes a little bit and hit the readers with a little bit of levity and a little bit of de-escalation of the tension, showing them more how, like, even in these horrible situations, in this time of just war and conflict and trauma and death, there are still moments of laughter, companionship, love. It's still there. So I feel like it's a very hard thing to balance in a book like this, but I think it's done very well. Yeah, we're kind of getting close to the end of our little section that we covered this week. Once again, Layla's asking Salam about Am and the boat, and just kind of, is there anything you can do? And Salam is like, I'll bargain with him. And Kawaf is also saying you can do more, even though he denied you. Well, yeah, because she goes back. Yeah, she goes back to work after being brought home by Keenan, and she talks to him again, to Am, and he's basically just like, no, ain't happening unless you I don't run a charity, it costs money, there's nothing I can do about it, get me the money or you're not getting a boat. And so she resigns herself to thinking that maybe she'll have to use the gold. And Kawaf is still pushing her to make this happen. And so when she goes to work the next day, goes to the hospital. Actually, before I get into this final bit here, I don't remember what day this happens in, but do you want to talk about the I forgot, is it Ahmed? Ahmed, was that the boy's name?
Yes.
The one that started singing?
That was before she actually, you know what? I remember now. That was before she left with Kinan to go take care of his younger sister. And this is actually based on a real incident. What happens with this boy.
Yeah. So yeah, this happened, a couple days before this, or at least I think maybe a day before this. But it's not really
before,
relevant.
like she's helping, doing all that, and then like Kinan comes in like right at the tail end of this thing.
That's right. He interrupts her like kind of her wallowing, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So, but I don't think it's remarkably important when this happened, but I feel like this was a heavy scene. There was a bombing at a school, and there's a lot of children coming in with a lot of just really, really bad injuries, and she hears this kid starting to sing, and he looks like he's okay. She doesn't see any blood, she doesn't see any missing limbs or anything like that, so a lot of the doctors haven't been paying him any mind because there's nothing visibly wrong with him, but the singing is what draws her to him. and she's talking to him, and she realizes that he has internal bleeding in his brain. And she calls the doctor over, and the doctor's like, "We don't have a neurosurgeon. The best thing we can do is just ease his suffering." And unfortunately, that's it. It can't be helped. It's a very, very sad and unfortunate reality that it doesn't matter how badly she wants to help him, or how badly any of the other doctors want to help him. It's a foregone conclusion, because they just don't have the means to save him. And he has this conversation with her, and he asks if he's going to die, and his response to that is basically just like, my mom says that my dad is in heaven, and this just means I'll get to see him again. And he's young, man. He's like real young, like maybe no more than 10, and it's just this harrowing thing where this is a part of this child's life, and it seems so kind of matter of fact that he's just accepted. He knows enough about death to where he's kind of accepted his fate, and is just it's almost crazy how he's just trying to find the silver lining in the fact that he's about to die. For once again, a child is feeling this, and it's so.
A 6-year-old child.
Oh, he's 6?
That's 6.
That's even worse. And it's so depressing, and it's such a heavy passage. It's like, oh my god, it just goes back to, I'm not going to go into this again, but it just goes back into the absolute depravity that is required for someone to do this to children. It's fucking disgusting, just to be as blunt as I can about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was, I feel like we would be remiss not to talk about that scene. I don't know, man. It's a lot.
I had to stop reading after that for a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. It was very, very emotional.
Yeah,
It's specifically the line, "Auntie, don't cry. When I go to heaven, I'll tell God everything." That was an actual quote from a dying child in during the conflict that she was quoting directly there.
Yeah. I don't like humanity sometimes, man.
It can be very dark. It can be very, very sad.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I just can't figure out how you could do this to somebody, even indirectly. It's just, I don't know, man. These were people with lives, that were just, I don't know. They were just cut short so callously and without any real thought, and it's. I don't know. I feel like I'm just mumbling and becoming incoherent, because it sucks. Once again, this is such a terrible word to use, because it doesn't fully capture the weight and the finality of all this. But it's just that's my brain has just become so overwhelmed by it that that's all I can say is it's just, this sucks, man. This really sucks, and I feel bad for not having better words to describe it.
Yeah, it's very hard to even fathom how something like this could happen.
Yeah, and I kind of said something similar earlier and in February with Beloved, but it hits a little different, because when you're reading just standard fiction, and you have characters die, or innocent civilians die, even children dying, it's sad, but like at least in the back of my head, I know it's not real, so it's only it's kind of a fleeting form of sadness, unless it's like a character that I cared about a lot, in which case it'll hit a lot harder. But because it's fiction, you have that cognitive dissonance, or that ludonarrative dissonance might be a better term to use, to where it's like, at least for me, I'm separating reality from fiction, and while I'm sad at this happening to the characters, it's something that it's no more than that. But even though this is fiction, it's like I said earlier, it's fiction that's based in reality, that something that actually happened. And I didn't know that, what you said earlier about how this particular scene was based on something that actually happened. I didn't know that until you just said that, so that just makes it even more just heartbreaking to know that this, not only was this, a fictional representation of something that happened, it's based on an actual specific child that actually died, that this happened to. And it's just it's so much different. Even though it is technically still a book of fiction, it's historical fiction that's based on reality, and it makes that alone makes the difference, to where it goes from being just, oh, I'm sad that this person died, to looking at it more as like, this isn't just a character. His name was Ahmed, right? Am I remembering
Ahmad.
that right?
It was Ahmad.
Ahmad?
Yeah, Ahmad. Ahmad.
Okay. I apologize. I was close though. It's not just some child named Ahmad died in this book. There was an actual child who probably was not named Ahmad, but Ahmad represents the actual real life child that died, and it makes everything have so much more weight to it. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this is like, just a me thing or what, but it's that minor difference in the fiction that makes it that much more less fictitious, that ludonarrative dissonance just kind of dissipates.
Right. Well,
you're picking hard books, dude.
Yeah.
Good books, don't get me wrong, but they are very hard.
Well, I don't know.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. See, I think there's one last part that we I think when see, let me look. Is that it, or is there anything else?
Yeah, we got to cover.
Oh, yeah,
we got one more quick thing to cover, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, she comes into work, and this is the day that Keenan is supposed to come and start filming in the hospital, and they got a shipment of medical supplies in, which is great because they were, more supplies is always needed, and she's going through and she's sorting through all of them, and that's when Keenan comes in, and she's talking to him. They're just having their little conversation. He's ready to do his filming there and whatnot. And so then there's another influx of a massive amount of injured, and one of the injured coming in it's Am. He's not injured, but he's holding a little girl, presumably his daughter, that is injured, and she was shot in the neck by a sniper. It looks like it just kind of grazed the side of her neck, but she is still bleeding out, and so her life is in danger. However, she is in she's in a savable state, and Salama, encouraged by Kawaf to do this, sees an opportunity and takes it, and in what is not a good action, I think is safe to say, on Salama's part, she threatens Am to give her and Layla a spot on the boat, or she will let his daughter die. And given that he doesn't really have much of a choice here, he agrees to her terms. I think she still agrees to pay him, but I think it's only like 1,000 apiece, right?
Yeah, it's 1,000 apiece, and the gold necklace.
Yeah. She gives him a gold necklace that she has, and it'll get them on a boat, and so he agrees to it. And so he saves her daughter.
I feel like I should point out though that she's kind of doing the implication And by that I mean, she says in the book, she's like, I would not have let the kid actually die, but she needed to make him think that she might.
Yeah, yeah, and I do believe that she would not have let the little girl die. It's just she's just lucky, I guess if you want to call it lucky, that Am did not call her bluff. So this isn't a moment of her putting a child's life on the line for her and Layla's safety. It's her seemingly doing that. It doesn't make it really much better, but it's still. But I get it. You gotta
Well, he's essentially doing the same thing to her. Like he is using her desperation and her fear of loss, vis-a-vis her sister-in-law slash best friend, to like extract leverage from her. So it's just the shoe is on the other foot. That doesn't necessarily make it good. It just kind of shows, how, in these situations, it creates these like these breaks in the social order that lead to not necessarily victimization, because like again, she said that she never would have actually let the kid bleed out, but it's just it's just I don't know, at the risk of sounding trite, it shows that war brings out the ugly side of everybody.
Yeah. So she secured the boat for her and Layla, and during a couple of her conversations with Keenan before, she'd asked him why he doesn't try to leave the country with his siblings as well, because she's like, they need you, they're children. If you die, they have nobody. Like, you should be trying to get out of the country as well. And he was adamant about how this is his country, this is his home. If he leaves, he's leaving a piece of himself behind, and he'd rather die than leave his home, his country. Which I gotta say, it's a form of national pride that feels very foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, this isn't me saying, oh, I vehemently hate being an American and I want to leave America and I want to go somewhere else. But it's not even something like that. It's just I've never felt such a deep and like personal love towards America specifically, to where I feel like this, but I've also never been in this situation, obviously. So it's just, I don't doubt that this is a real and actual, like, legitimate feeling that he's feeling, and I don't doubt that it's, I'm not saying it's a wrong feeling. It's just, I'm reading that and I'm just like, cannot relate.
Well, the difference between you and he, in that respect, I would guess, is a sense of something very big could change. He doesn't love Syria necessarily in the current state that it was. Like, he's not like, I love Assad and everything that's happening. That's not really it. It's like, it is a sort of maybe a revolutionary kind of like he's in love with the dream of finally living in a free society, of his children or his siblings, living a different and qualitatively better life than the one he lives now. And it's the idea of the doing right by his his family and his ancestors. It's that kind of thing. It's something that I would guess at this juncture in American history we couldn't quite grasp. I mean, there's people that are certainly patriotic, but
Well,
in some of these,
I feel like
I question what the patriotism is towards specifically.
yeah, well, I feel like in some cases for some Americans, I would not argue it's patriotism. I argue it's jingoism, personally.
Oh. Potato, but
Yeah. But yeah, maybe it's just kind of another one of those things to where it's one of those not really it's one of those privileges that you don't really truly understand or fathom until you see someone who doesn't have that, and like how they how they live and how they deal with their day-to-day situations, that you realize, oh yeah, this is something that I can't fathom, that I've never had to deal with, and I just don't know how I would deal with it. And it's so maybe it's just another one of those kind of, like I said, one of those privileges that you and I have that obviously these people don't. So we don't really.
Yeah, that could be true, certainly.
Yeah, like I said, we've never had a massive armed conflict on American soil in our lifetime. So it's just kind of one of those things where all we can do is look at
in living memory, even.
It. Yeah. Yeah, all we can do is just kind of look at examples of people that have experienced it and just sympathize with them, because that's all we can really do. At least in terms of, like, you and I sitting here on our computers recording a video, that's all we can do in that, is just sympathize with the situation. So yeah, like I said, it's not me trying to say that he's feeling any of his feelings are wrong or anything like that. It's just kind of one of those things that I guess, like I said, in my privilege, just it's something I've never personally felt in terms of, like, my feelings towards America specifically. Maybe it's also because of just how broad and, like, just kind of all over the place America is culturally, that I feel like there's no, like, one particular thing you can pin down and say is America, because of just how different everything is, but how regional things can be.
Well, there is one thing that's a pretty strong through line, and that's, like, a sort of individualism. And there are different expressions of it in a conservative and liberal idiom, but we don't necessarily need to break off and do that. But
I'm not
but
trying
broadly,
to derail us too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the point is that he has a very, very strong root in Syria, and if he feels like leaving Syria would be ripping that root out and ostensibly killing him. Maybe not physically, but in, like, basically all other ways, it would be a spiritual death. And the reason why I bring up this point of conversation is Salama, she feels, after she secures the boat, she comes to the realization that even though she hopefully just saved Layla's life, her unborn child's life, and Salama, her own life, she realized that she just committed spiritual suicide herself. And that's where this section ends, is her coming to that realization.
Very heavy end.
Yeah, it's I feel like that was a very, very strong thematic end to our coverage of this. Obviously, I don't know what happens after that, but I read as you mentioned at the beginning, my wife is the one that suggested this book, and the three of us are reading it all together, and we all agreed to stop here, so none of us have read past this point, and my wife was the one to get there first, because it's my wife reads a lot and reads very quickly, and is she's very, very avid reader. Very, very avid reader. And so we were talking, and it was I was like, is this a good spot to stop? And Caden was like, oh yeah, this is a really, really good you picked a real good spot to stop this section. I'm like, all right, cool, that's glad to hear it. And I got there and I'm like, oh wow, I almost feel like I could have seen, just like right below that paragraph, end of part 1, and I'm like, oh man. So that's the story so far up to this point.
Yeah, it's so far a very, very good book.
It's beautifully written.
Yes, very, very affecting.
Yeah, and I'm enjoying it a lot. Well, once again, this is kind of the same thing with Beloved. I don't feel like enjoy is the right word because I'm not having fun reading this, but um, I feel like my time is very, very well spent reading this right now. It's a very, very well written, very well realized, very well paced book, and yeah, it's I don't want to say words that make it sound positive because I almost said it's a joy to read because it's not a joy to read. It's a horror to read. You know, it's a travesty to read. It's a horrible, atrocious conflict that you're reading in real time, and it's all these bad and terrible things happening, and so it's not fun. It's not happy. It's not joyous, but it's a very engaging read.
So there are a few kind of final thoughts that I'd also like to say about this novel. Kind of like we were saying, it's really affected me in a lot of ways, and we kind of discussed that. And we mentioned even though that this novel takes place 12 years ago, there are definitely some just inescapable parallels to the conflict in Gaza today, and I don't know. I feel compelled to kind of speak about this here. And April, as I said at the top, is Arab American Heritage Month. But I've not really seen nor heard much from even the supposedly liberal and broad-minded sectors of society. For the second time in my life, I see a mass dehumanization of Arabs, and at this time, particularly Palestinians. As was the case the first time, we see the parallel in also that there is a sort of rising tide of Islamophobia. But to this point, it definitely seems less successful than the years of the War on Terror, and for that I am profoundly grateful. One reason that those who would seek to dehumanize Arabs, particularly the Palestinians, are failing is due to people like Kinan, who document these tragedies that are ongoing in the Middle East, in Syria then and in Gaza now. It's no exaggeration to say that these people are they risk their lives and they're facing violent retaliation. In both cases, they talk about in the book, they don't want to make calls necessarily because the Syrian government could be tracking their calls and using them to target people, and that is also true. They're in Gaza today. We also see in Salama she's working in a hospital essentially as just a pharmacy student that's become a surgeon. There was one particularly haunting passage where she mentions her fear of the hospital being bombed and what that would mean for the mothers who give birth and for the sort of the preemie babies specifically. In Gaza, a city with a population density greater than London, there were 36 hospitals. In northern Gaza, there are no more as of December. In total, I have seen reports of there being as few as 9 remaining in, quote, semi-functional capacity. And I want anybody who's listening to either this or, Dusty, you as well, I want people to think about that. One of the primary sources of danger from the vantage point of the characters of the novels, and the reason why Salama and Kanan spent the evening together, were the sniper attacks. In 2018, during a series of protests known as the Great March of Return, Israeli snipers targeted the limbs of protesters with an intent to cripple and to maim. Many of those targeted were children, and soldiers were known to boast of how many, quote, knees they took, end quote. And this is to say nothing of the people that were killed outright then or are being killed now. There's not, what we're seeing are, you know, just horrific war crimes and a genocide on a scale that has not been seen in the last 50 years at least. And there's not a single day that goes by where every cell in my body isn't crying out, "Ceasefire now," in the name of our basic humanity and of anything good left in this world. One of the reasons I'm, very glad to cover this book, particularly in April, is because it is such a vivid and human story that pushes back so much of the messaging to show the warmth and beauty of the people and the cultures of the region. And specifically, I would like to take a moment here to emphasize that Zoulfa Katouh deserves all of the success and love that I've seen online for this book, which depicts a blossoming love between a very gentle Muslim man and a very strong Muslim woman. These are people that some would have you see as your enemy, or somehow less than you, or at the very least in terms of very narrow and very cruel stereotypes. One of the great aspects of literature is the ability to take on the subjectivity of others to a greater degree than almost any other art form. To see through their eyes and in a way to know their minds. And, if anything, if there could be anything that people take away from this show or from this book, I hope it would be that. And so those are my final thoughts for this this particular episode, but that's kind of what's going on in my mind as I read this book. I would like to thank everybody for listening. This has been another episode, perhaps a little bit more serious, of the Sad Boys Book Club. And thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yep. Take care.